And this is an issue that has gone on throughout the course of the offseason.
Who averages 263 passing yards a game. That ranks 11th in the NFL.
Sounds good.
They don't always win. It's a pedestal some of these guys put him on, and others on Undisputed have put him on. Aaron Rodgers has become the most overhyped and overrated quarterback in the history of pro football. This is where you place him, and you never even think that, wait a second, he's not what he used to be. Aaron Rodgers got to one Super Bowl.
It's never been about revenge. It's about a reckoning.
Welcome back to Korey's Random Packer Thoughts. I'm Korey Urban. Here we are, after almost 2 years, back by popular demand. I've had a lot of interest in people asking me, where have you been, Korey? What is going on? Why haven't you been doing your Random Thoughts? Well, I'm back, and just in time for the 2022 playoffs. So thank you for joining me today. I'm going to go through some things that I wanted to talk about in no particular order, but obviously things I want to kind of try to break down. So number one, took a little bit of a break just because I wanted to, and because things got kind of political with sports and political during the pandemic, and I wanted just to completely downshift away from any and all of that. So that's why I didn't really do anything. Didn't really post anything online. And I'm really trying to bring some of this back so we can all get back to normal. So thanks for bearing with me, and I'm back. And hopefully I'll maybe do one next week if they win. So here we go. All right, let's talk a little bit about the offseason. Obviously, as you know, during the offseason, Rodgers threatened to retire, threatened to not want to play ever again for the Green Bay Packers, largely because he felt like he was not involved or not being asked to be involved by Brian Gutekunst, the Packer general manager, and felt like he had a bad relationship with the front office, or at least that was what we were led to believe from several media reports and clickbaits and a million different other things if you've been following that. And so all off-season last year it was, will he or won't he return to the Green Bay Packers? And if he was not, would Jordan Love be up to the task of taking a team that had been to two consecutive NFC title games back and compete for a potential third with Matt LaFleur as head coach? And as we all found out, it turned out that a couple things happened. Aaron Rodgers obviously came back, decided to bring back the band a little bit by getting his best friend, Randall Cobb, back in. And it looks like some negotiations were being done, and it looks like some people actually sat down and started working together. Surprise, surprise. In the business world, this is called sitting down and actually having open conversations. I don't know why Brian Gutekunst or Aaron Rodgers felt like they needed to hold firm, but my guess is, and it's just a guess, but I think based on how some of this season has played out and how the relationships have evolved and how people's skill sets have been shown, and I'll get into all that in a little bit, that all of that came down to just lack of communication. I think that Aaron Rodgers felt dissed, that because he rightfully is a NFL superstar, that he wasn't being asked his input as much as he thought he should, and I think the Packer organization didn't reach out to him as much as they probably should have to get his thoughts. And so somewhere in the middle was a solution, and I think, based on the evidence, things have been patched up a little bit. Now, uncertainty is uncertainty, so we never know, and we don't know what's going to happen after this year. But this podcast, this specific video is not about next year. It's all about what is happening right now. So with that, let's kind of jump right into it. So obviously, everyone remembers the first game of the year versus the Saints. And if you remember, because of a threatening hurricane, I believe, the game was moved from New Orleans to Jacksonville. So it was not a home game for the Packers. And it technically wasn't a home game, obviously, for the Saints. But the Saints got to sort of pick the location, and they picked Jacksonville because Jacksonville's hot, and it was hot in September. And I think a combination happened there. I think the Packers were expecting to play in a dome. They had to play outside. They were not obviously ready to play football. I think there were a lot of distractions. I think the game plan from LaFleur was not up to snuff. And I don't think the players were, quite honestly, ready. I think that they thought they were a really good team and they could kind of walk in and handle their business somewhat. And they got schooled. They got completely, I think it was 38-3 they got beat. So that was a serious wake-up call. And, of course, because of all the offseason drama associated with Aaron Rodgers, a lot of that came to pass a little bit, but at the same time, it was also something that people were pointing to and saying, oh my gosh, we sound the alarm. We've got all these great players. We've got Aaron Rodgers. There might be something funky in Denmark here. What are we going to see? And as we all have experienced this year, the Packers went on to just pretty much dominate and win, I should say, not necessarily dominate, but win pretty much all of their games with the exception of two other games. I'm not going to count the Lions game that just happened because that was the end of the year and they had secured first round bye throughout the entire playoffs. And so, yes, Matt LaFleur wanted to win that Lions game last week, and I'm sure all the players did too, but they didn't play all of their starters for at least a half. So you can't necessarily say you really wanted to win if you're not going to play all of your starters and your best players. So that's how I feel with that. So that means there were only two other games that we lost. The first game that we lost since the debacle in Jacksonville was at Kansas City. And what happened there? More controversy. Aaron Rodgers said he was immunized, to use his words, and he obviously was referring to something completely different, and the press didn't follow up. Whose fault is it there? You decide. I'm not going to get in any kind of political debate on this show. But I will say that because of that, because he caught COVID, he was out for the Kansas City game. In comes Jordan Love. Jordan Love did okay. Jordan Love is a second-year player that didn't really get to do any off-season training or off-season program because of COVID last year in 2020. So really, if you want to kind of slide it in, if you really think about it last year too, he didn't even really suit up. Tim Boyle was the backup. They had him not even really suiting up for games. So this is the first year he's really been a backup. And he played okay. He didn't play great. They lost the game. But think about this. You're Jordan Love. It's your first year as a backup. Your first year in a full offseason program. You're not expected to play. Boom, Aaron Rodgers gets COVID. you're kind of thrust into that. Yes, you always have to be ready to go in. Yes, you have to be ready as a backup. But that was a strange week because the Kansas City Chiefs were obviously on a losing streak at that point. There was a lot of focus on them getting back to the W column and getting some wins. And in comes Jordan Love. Now, if they can't beat Jordan Love at home after sort of a loss run, something's really wrong with Kansas City. And so there was a lot of pressure on Kansas City to get that W, and probably too much pressure on Jordan Love to go into a hostile environment in a short week, not knowing if he was going to start, not getting a lot of the reps, not having all of the weapons that he wants. And then obviously Matt LaFleur has to change his approach because he's not dealing with a, 3-time MVP. He's dealing with a basically rookie NFL quarterback that is learning a system still, and he's going to have to shave and pare down the offense. So you can't necessarily blame anybody in that situation, in my opinion. You want to blame Aaron Rodgers, that's fine, but guess what? He might have gotten COVID anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So that's our first loss. And then our second loss, of course, after that, I'm going to call it the second, even though it was technically the third loss, was at Minnesota, which is, and I want to talk just a little bit about that because for those of you that don't know, I live in the Minneapolis area. I've been following the Vikings. My wife is a diehard Vikings fan, which makes life kind of interesting sometimes, but I respect her passion for the Vikings, even though I think as a Packer fan, you're asking for punishment, but I get it. She even would probably acknowledge that, but at the same time, they get up for the Packer game at US Bank Stadium, previously the Metrodome, and that is really their Super Bowl. It really is, and it will always be until they start to dominate the NFC North, which may happen in, the next decade or 5, I don't know. But until that happens, they're going to have a bullseye on the Packers every single time they come into town, and they're going to feel like their season is somewhat of a success if they can beat the Packers, especially at home in US Bank. And that's exactly what happened. Although the Packers gave them a great run for their money, the Packers lost by 3 points if you remember, Mason Crosby missed a pretty decent, easy field goal. The difference was 3 points, and the Vikings won their Super Bowl in Minneapolis. So congratulations to the Vikings, who finished 8-9 and out of the playoffs this year, and actually had their head coach and their GM fired. So congratulations to the Vikings. What a successful season you had. Now, moving on. So that was our third loss on the year, and then we didn't lose for the rest of the way until we got to the Lions game. And again, I'm not going to count that as a loss, even though statistically, yes, it is a loss. But since we had secured the NFC North and also home field advantage throughout the playoffs with a first-round bye, at that point, we had accomplished all of our regular season goals. The only thing that was left to do was to get some people some bonuses and some actual records, including Davante Adams' record for most yards in a single season, which he was able to do and surpass Jordy Nelson this year, which is completely amazing. And by the way, he did miss, I believe it was the Arizona game, and so even though there were 17 regular games this year for the first time ever, he was able to do that in 16 games. So I don't believe that there really should be a quote asterisk at the end of that record, because Davante Adams did indeed do it in 16 games. I believe he was out for the Arizona game with COVID or COVID-related symptoms or something, and so he did finish the year strong. And the goal there on why LaFleur and Rodgers and some folks wanted to start, and I thought this was summed up very well, was the fact that LaFleur said, well, this is sort of a double-edged sword. If you play your players and they get hurt, everyone will be like, why did you play your players? You don't need to play them. But if you don't play your players and you rest all your starters, and now you have, that week off and another week and then a practice week, you're really talking 3 weeks before your starters get any kind of really game experience. And so that means they might come out kind of rusty and they might lay an egg. And we've seen that happen to teams that are really good, that have home field advantage, and they come out and kind of get punched in the mouth a little bit. And so LaFleur said, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, and I feel like we're here to win, and so we're going to play our starters. But again, he only played the starters for most of the starters anyways, for about a half, and really it seemed like just wanted to keep them fresh, keep them on the right track, and also help to some of these veterans to get their records or to get their bonuses. And the defense kind of laid an egg, didn't tackle very well at all, gave up some trick plays, and that seemed to be the difference in that game. But again, I'm not going to count that, even though that was the fourth loss. So really 3 losses this year. The first loss, it was the worst, the Saints loss, and then the other 2, I think, were, you never want to lose. An L is an L, and a W is a W, by the way. And that goes for Vikings fans, too, out there that might be listening to this. I've heard some Vikings fans say, well, we're 3-4 plays away from being 10-7 or 11-5 or 11-6 or whatever. And that's true maybe, but you got to get it. You got to win. You got to hit those field goals. You got to make those interceptions. You got to make those catches. Those kinds of things matter. And they're the difference between mediocre teams and good teams or great teams. And that's, I think, what the Packers are, is they were able to execute very well, and they deserve to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. So congratulations, and the recap there. Now I want to talk a little bit about Brian Gutekunst, because obviously some of you out there really believe that the Packers in general, after they drafted Jordan Love in early 2020, that this really upset the apple cart, and I believe maybe it did, and I believe maybe in hindsight he might not have done that, or he would have probably tried to communicate better to Aaron Rodgers, and that's a big, I'm sure that's a big sticking in Aaron Rodgers' craw on that draft pick, no doubt. It would be to, I think, any player of his caliber, and it should be. And I think Brian Gutekunst is sort of at fault for not communicating what his intentions were, or why he might do that, or even giving Aaron Rodgers a heads up. But really, what has he done since, and how has this relationship been? And again, I'm not going to concentrate on the future. I'm just going to really concentrate on what the GM has done this year. And I'm going to make a case for him to be Executive of the Year, because I really feel he's earned it. And I really feel that he's done what he needs to do, starting with trying to open up communications and repair a relationship with Aaron Rodgers and getting them back. What did he do? Well, I think they had a sit down. I think that he allowed and conceded the fact that if Aaron Rodgers wants to come back, he's going to have to do some things, because Aaron Rodgers is a star. Star NFL players, like it or not, are entitled to a certain, to be treated a certain way, to be communicated or handled a certain way, because they bring in so much money and so much attention to an organization that they deserve it, quite frankly. I mean, how can you put a value exactly on a dollar value on what Aaron Rodgers means to the Green Bay Packer organization, Green Bay, the city, Wisconsin, the state, and really just the NFL in general? I don't know if you really can. I think everybody wants to see him play. He was talking about retiring. I think he felt kind of trapped and said, I can do other things, and I might want to walk away. And Brian Gutekunst, I think, convinced him to come back, and said, I'm guessing, just complete speculation on my part, but probably said there was make some type of apology of, I could have done a better job of communicating to you and meeting you halfway, and what can I do? And the first one was getting Randall Cobb in the mix. Randall Cobb, obviously a fan favorite. Randall Cobb kind of wasting away in Dallas and in Houston, and Aaron Rodgers brought him back. A lot of people were like, well, he's only bringing him back because it's his friend, and we've drafted Amari Rodgers, and Amari Rodgers is going to be sort of the slot guy now, and he's the future, and Randall Cobb is old news and is kind of washed up. He's 30, 31 now, and is he going to be able to do anything? Well, Randall Cobb came in and kind of really ignited some things, and since Robert Tonyan went out with an injury, and some other folks were hurt, and other people were out during games, including Davante Adams. There was a lot of trust between Rodgers and Cobb, and you could see that on the field, and you can see the energy that Cobb brings to that receiving room and to the Packer organization overall. So I'm really happy that he was able to come back, and Rodgers got him back. And I think, I think Rodgers is able to kind of look at the Packers front office, the executive team, and Brian Gutekunst and say, "See, I know what I'm doing. Like, I know I can add value here with some of my thoughts and suggestions on how to help this team improve." And I think the GM really appreciated that and said, "You know what, you're right, and we need to do a better job of that." On the other side of the coin, and why I'm trying to make the case for Brian Gutekunst is, let's just talk about what Brian Gutekunst has done. I mean, I think he's done an amazing job as a GM, considering how the cupboard was kind of bare. We were in the decline after McCarthy got fired at the end of 2018. And, we're now on the cusp of being on an NFC championship game for the third year in a row under Matt LaFleur, a new head coach. A coach, by the way, that has only lost a total of 10 games, if you don't count Detroit, 9 games in 3 years. 9 games in 3 years. Mike Zimmer for the Vikings lost 9 games this year alone. So Packer fans need to understand we're very fortunate that we're having good leadership that's meshing with the players and getting in good people. But Brian Gutekunst brought in Devondre Campbell, inside linebacker, and in case you're not paying attention, Devondre Campbell made first-team All-Pro defense on for the NFL this year. First-team All-Pro. That has not been done by a Packer linebacker since Ray Nitschke 54 years ago. Let me say that again because it's vaguely interesting and important. It's been 54 years since we've had an all-pro inside linebacker. Brian Gutekunst went and plucked this guy off of teams, and none of these teams are utilizing him effectively, and he's an all-pro? How in the hell did we get this guy? And yet we got him, and by the way, when he's on the field, and he wasn't on the field, he was given off against Detroit. So there's another reason why we might have lost. But guess what? We gave up trick plays. We gave up, some more rushing yards. That guy needs to be on the field. He's not a great run stuffer, but he's so good in the pass. And in this time in the NFL, this age in the NFL, you really need your linebackers to be able to cover in the passing game. And Devondre Campbell has just done an outstanding job of getting that done. So just a huge signing in the offseason. Probably one of his best offseason signings. And that includes Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith and Billy Turner, all of which have been outstanding and Pro Bowl type players. But Campbell has just been a cut above and really has improved our defense this year greatly. Obviously, we cannot forget Rasul Douglas. So, I think that, when Jair Alexander went down earlier this year and Kevin King was hurt, they were really scraping the bottom of the barrel. They don't have a lot of third or fourth string cornerbacks that can really jump in and play. I mean, we've kind of seen some of those guys at the bottom of the roster attempt to play, and they just really can't. So they go out and they scour his scouting department for professional go out and looks, and they find Rasul Douglas on the practice squad of the Arizona Cardinals. The practice squad. The guy was just drafted by the Eagles in the 3rd round like 3 years ago, I think, or something. And so he's twiddling his thumbs on the practice squad. The Packers signed him off the practice squad because you can do that. If you can put somebody on your active 53-man roster, you can sign somebody off of anybody's practice squad. And so the Packers bring in Rasul Douglas. They plug him in right away. And right away he starts to show he's got some moxie. He's up hitting people. He's covering people. But nobody expected him to have the year that he had. And I would argue that he should have probably been a Pro Bowler. The guy comes in October. He has 2 game-sealing interceptions. The one in Arizona was worth its weight in gold already. But then he has like 2 pick sixes and several pass defended. They tried to test him, obviously, because the rookie, Eric Stokes, our rookie, has done an amazing job. And so after a while, they started trying to pick on Rasul Douglas. I'm talking about opposing teams. And Rasul Douglas responded with his best season ever. Rasul Douglas is going to get paid. I don't know if the Packers can keep him. I'm thinking that they probably can't because they've got Stokes. They've got to try to sign Jair Alexander back. They're not going to be able to keep him, I don't think. But what an in-season addition. Kudos to Brian Gutekunst and his staff for bringing in Douglas, and Douglas has been outstanding. Whitney Marcellus, another key signing in midseason after Zadarius Smith is down, and then Gary got hurt for a while. I think Preston Smith might have been gone for 1 game or something. And so they're looking for some pass rush. They bring him in. He just starts to get going, then he pulls his bicep. But guess what? Marcellus is going to be back, or at least is practicing to come back for the playoffs. And nobody saw that coming either. So we're getting a lot of great value for these mid-season, in-season additions that the executive team is and the personnel department is signing. So, and then also Brian Gutekunst this year drafts Eric Stokes, first rounder out of Georgia, cornerback, and Josh Myers, center out of Ohio State, to replace Corey Linsley, who left in free agency to go to the Chargers this offseason. And right away, Josh Myers is able to come in and start at center. He's a big center. He's a tall center, a little bit different than Corey Linsley, so they had to work out some time, but was playing pretty well. Was a rookie, is a rookie. You expect him to make some mistakes, but overall, to have a second-round pick come in and start calling offensive blocking schemes and win the trust of Aaron Rodgers in his first year, huge draft pick. And then Eric Stokes, our first-round draft pick. Historically, it seems like we kind of swing and miss on a lot of our first-rounders in Green Bay. But this year, Brian Gutekunst and team, I think, really hit maybe the jackpot on this. Eric Stokes has had a great year as a rookie. Obviously, made some rookie mistakes. That's to be expected. But his play has been outstanding. And when Jair Alexander went down, they really counted on him even more. And just if you're wondering how much they trust him, he is playing so much ball. He hardly ever comes off the field. I think he played all of the snaps against Detroit and all of the snaps against Minnesota, or almost all the snaps against Minnesota the week before. So you're not going to, late in the year, whether it's a game of importance or not, you're not going to have a rookie out there that you don't trust. And they trust him a lot. They feel like he has really advanced. And let's face it, by the time you've played 17 games, are you really a rookie anymore in the NFL? Probably not. And the way and the number of snaps that guy has played tells me that they feel like he's going to be something. I remember on Monday night or Sunday night, whenever I think they were playing, was it Minnesota? I think it was Minnesota. You heard Chris Collinsworth say he thinks that Eric Stokes is going to be a star in this league. I heard Collins talk about him in another Packer game, and I sort of agree. I mean, I don't think he's as flashy. He hasn't really picked off as many passes. He's not. I mean, he'll probably get there, but his pass defense is just really outstanding, and he's not going to give up a lot of big plays. I mean, yes, it's happened, and he is a rookie, and he does get burned by some elite players sometimes, but overall, that guy has really stepped up. And again, that's a Brian Gutekunst pick. So Brian Gutekunst, solid drafts. You can argue about the Jordan Love pick. We can talk about that all you want. But overall, some of his picks have been really outstanding, and his free agent acquisition, how they acquire free agents has been amazing over the last 2-3 years. And by getting Devondre Campbell in, that has really solidified the defense. Eric Stokes, Rasul Douglas, Whitney Marcellus, all of these guys have really increased and have done a tremendous job to solidify the defense. So kudos to Brian Gutekunst. I think he's had an executive of the year type of year. Even Aaron Rodgers has admitted that he's really impressed with the front office and Brian Gutekunst bringing in some of these players that have really transformed and transcended the team into something unique and something different. And I just think it's fantastic. So that is the recap on those guys as well and why Brian Gutekunst, I think, has done a great job. So for all of the hate and haters out there, Brian Gutekunst, I think we have to take a step back and go, what has he really done? Because, guys, there are 31 other teams out there, and, there are a lot of GMs that have been around and have done some good things, including drafting some elite players. Rick Spielman in the Vikings is an example. He just got fired. He drafted Justin Jefferson a couple years ago. He drafted Delvin Cook. He brought in Kirk Cousins. You could argue about Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins had the same stats as Brett Favre had when Brett Favre took the Vikings to the NFC title game in 2009, like 30-some touchdowns and only 7 interceptions or something. I mean, Kirk Cousins is putting up some great numbers. I don't think you can really argue with some of the things they've done, and he was fired this year. So, we need to really be appreciative of what we have. Because I remember in the past when we've made some really bad GM decisions. And so I'm really happy with that. Okay, moving on, just because we're going a little bit too long here. Davante Adams. Is Davante Adams one of the best receivers you've ever seen in Green Bay? I would say yes, he is. I think Davante Adams is the best receiver in Green Bay that I've seen since Sterling Sharp. Yes, I agree that there have been some great receivers in Green Bay, Jordy Nelson and Donald Driver and James Jones, Antonio Freeman, Robert Brooks. I could go back and go on. There have been really some great receivers in Green Bay, but Davante Adams is just special. Something happened after his second year, and it really started to click with him and what he needed to do to be an elite receiver. And that's exactly what he's been in the last few years. And he just seems like he almost gets better. The other thing is his connection to Aaron Rodgers is almost paranormal. It's freaky, isn't it? I mean, those two can look at each other and know what they're going to do. And they almost have like a mind meld, and they're connected to each other so strong. And Davante Adams' release, Davante Adams' feet, how he tackles everything, what he's going to do. He has a bag of weapons and tools at his disposal that he can take on almost any defense and win against any defense. And by the way, these teams know this. They're trying to stop him. They're double teaming him. They're triple teaming him. And he still is getting numbers that are just insane. I think that hasn't been the case with a lot of really good receivers in Green Bay. I think in the past, Jordy Nelson could be taken out of a game, or Donald Driver could be taken out of a game, etc. But Davante Adams just cannot be stopped. With Aaron Rodgers throwing to him, it's almost unfair sometimes. And you know what I'm talking about. Some of those dime drops that Rodgers has, and Adams just literally turns around and grabs it. One of the things that I thought was so cool that I heard that it was sort of inside baseball or inside football in this scenario that Chris Collinsworth was talking about, where Davante Adams won't put his hands up or won't even really look too much until the ball's almost there, so that there's no indication for the defender on where the ball is. So if you're doing a back shoulder throw or fade, you just can't stop it, because you can't turn. If you're a defender, you can't turn around in midair and look for the ball, because you're going to lose contain. You're going to lose focus. So you're really focused on the receiver and when the receiver is going to catch. And if the receiver, like Adams, puts his hands up at the last possible minute, possible second, possible nanosecond, there's no way to stop that. And that's the power that Davante Adams really brings. So man, I hope they sign him. They might have to franchise him in the offseason. Again, we're really not talking about next year yet, but I was hoping they would sign him in the season. They didn't do that. Clearly, he needs to be the highest paid wide receiver in the league. He's earned it. He deserves it. If the Packers can't do it, somebody else will pay him a boatload of money. And I think that if Rodgers does come back, or if Adams does get signed or come back, that's going to factor into Rodgers, whether Rodgers will come back as well. So I just think this team would be completely different without a Devonta Adams, and certainly without a Rodgers. But those two are just so important, and just a tip of the hat to Adams on how great he's played this year. And then finishing out my rounding out my top two topics to talk about are Rodgers and LaFleur. First, I'll start with Rodgers. Does he deserve the MVP? I think he does. I just got done watching a highlight reel of his 2021 highlights. He just looks so smooth and so confident out there. His throws have been crisp and sharp. If you remember, 2017, 2018, there was some legitimate criticism and cause for concern because Rodgers just wasn't seeming to throw the ball as well as he could or had been in the past prior to those years. And over the last couple years in particular, and I think you started to see this when LaFleur came in, but 2020 and 2021, I mean, he is just throwing some amazing passes and really being super smart with the ball. He doesn't fumble. That's the thing about Rodgers, right? Rodgers just doesn't fumble. That I hope I didn't jinx him, so let me knock on wood here. But Rodgers just doesn't fumble the football. He's got really big hands. He knows how to protect the ball. He only threw 4 interceptions. And by the way, he threw 2 interceptions, I believe, in the Saints game. So if you think about it, he only threw 2 more interceptions in 16 games. And he threw for, 37 touchdown passes? He didn't have any touchdown passes in that first week 1 game against the Saints. And I believe he had 2 interceptions. And so I think he had, if you think about the last 16 games of the year, 37-2. I mean, that's just insane. So he takes such good care of the football. Those of us that remember how great Favre was, we knew, my saying was, live by the Favre, die by the Favre. Because Favre did not take care of the football. Favre was trying to win the game. God bless him. You loved to see that happen, but he would lose games for us in the process too because he would try to force things too much. Rodgers just doesn't do that. Rodgers just understands that it's so important not to turn the ball over, so he's not fumbling, he's not forcing it. He will do 50-50 balls sometimes, but he's only going to do it in certain situations. And the times that I think that he does start throwing interceptions is when he feels like he has to force it because the game is getting out of reach. And we saw that last year with Tampa Bay, and we saw that, obviously during the Saints game in Week 1. So, but overall, Rodgers' stats have just been amazing. And you take him off this team, I just don't think I think with Jordan Love, I think we're struggling to finish, 8 and 9. So Rodgers clearly deserves the MVP. He should win the MVP. I just saw, he was a first-team quarterback on the NFL first-team placement. He had 34 of 50 votes. Tom Brady was second with 15. That bodes really well for him winning the MVP with the sports writers and the MVP voters out there that are 50 of them. Doesn't mean he'll definitely get it, but it bodes pretty well. So we'll see what shakes out. But he clearly deserves his second MVP. And again, here we are. The guy's 38 years old, and if he wins an MVP, it'll be 2 years in a row of winning the MVP, and that'll be his 4th MVP. Packers will have a lot of decisions there. And then finally, wrapping that up, let's talk a little bit about Matt LaFleur. So, Matt LaFleur now has a couple coaches, including Nathaniel Hackett and Luke Getsy, who are being asked to be interviewed for head coaching positions. Nathaniel Hatchett is the offensive coordinator. Luke Getsy is the passing game coordinator and quarterback coach. Both of those two coaches are very deserving of interviews to be a head coach. That could change the dynamic for next year. But it just kind of goes to show you what a great staff LaFleur has put together. And, the thing is, what did he do for defense? I think Matt LaFleur wanted his own guy in the defensive chair. He was kind of saddled up when he was brought in 2018 with Mike Pettin. If you remember, Mike Pettin had a pretty good year in 2018, and then in 2019. My best guess is Brian Gutekunst and Mark Murphy kind of said, "We want you to come in and be our head coach. We like our defensive coordinator. We want you to have him for 1 year. You can decide what you want to do after that." But because that first year they went to the NFC title game and then lost it in such convincing fashion against, I think it was the 49ers. I think Matt LaFleur was really kind of pissed about that, but he kept Mike Pettin for 1 more year. I think he probably had conversations on what he expected, and I don't think Mike Pettin really addressed that. So he brought in Joe Barry this year to take over for offense coordinator and fired Mike Pettin last year. But the thing is that I think they finished with almost the exact ranking as last year. And I want to say, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but I want to say that the Packers ended up as the ninth best scoring defense and the 13th overall defense this year in the league. And those rankings were identical to the 2020 season in which Mike Pettin was the defensive coordinator. So here we have 1 year later with Joe Barry, and statistically it's identical. But statistics don't always tell the whole story, as we all know. And so I think that the vibe is better. I think that they've got different players in. I think they've got different accountability. There's obviously been some serious injuries that have prohibited some of the best players from being on the field, namely Jair Alexander and Zadarius Smith, who have been gone. Zadarius Smith has been gone since the first game of the year, which they lost against the Saints, obviously. And then he's been gone. He is, and that's the other really good news. And I'll just one little, offshoot of this conversation about Matt LaFleur. The Packers now they have Jair Alexander practicing, slated to come back for the playoffs. Zadarius Smith is now practicing, slated to come back for the playoffs. Those two have been gone for the bulk of the year, Zadarius Smith being gone for most of the year. As I mentioned, Whitney Marcellus is also been practicing and slated to come back. Whether he comes back this week or next week or something, we don't know. But you have to think these guys all want to play, and you have to think, given what they're after, the Packers want them to play, and there's a huge incentive to get them cleared. But they have to be cleared, and they have to, professional athletes have to be, it's an art and science, and obviously no one's going to take away their earning power by forcing them to play, even if they think that they can go. So they have to be cleared by medical, but it bodes really well that they're practicing. Also, Billy Turner has been practicing and is slated to come back. He was the offensive starter on the the right tackle all year, and then Dennis Kelly came in, and Dennis Kelly has played very well. And that's another, I didn't even get to that with Brian Gutekunst, but Dennis Kelly is another free agent signing in the offseason that came in, were kind of a cast-off from Tennessee, and lo and behold, he doesn't play all year. Billy Turner goes down, Dennis Kelly comes in, boom, they don't miss a beat. And Dennis Kelly is not playing and giving up sacks or giving up stuff in the ground game. Has he played perfect? No, but you don't need those guys to play perfect. You need them to be consistent, and that's what Dennis Kelly has done. And so kudos again to Brian Gutekunst for bringing in yet another stellar veteran. So Billy Turner slated to come back. And then, of course, last week against the Detroit Lions, Josh Meyer and David Bakhtiari come back, and they play for almost the first whole half, and they both play pretty darn well. Obviously, all eyes were kind of on David Bakhtiari. I'll give you some inside baseball on what I heard from Bob McGinn from his podcast, where if you don't know who Bob McGinn is an old beat writer for the Packers for like literally 30, 40 years. He just retired recently, but he does a podcast with Tyler Dunn from golong.com. Tyler Dunn was also a beat writer for the Packers, but then went on a Bleacher Report and some other places. And so they have a weekly Packer podcast, which I'd encourage people to go to, called golong.com, and you can sign up for that. Bob McGinn had kind of said his review of Bakhtiari was he played really well, but he was kind of playing like he was playing on eggshells. I didn't see that. I thought that Bakhtiari played pretty well. I went back and looked at the highlights and looked at most of the snaps. I thought Bakhtiari played pretty solid. It's his first game back. Is he going to be 100%? No. And I don't think he really wanted to. He alluded to this in a couple different interviews where he wanted to come back, felt he could come back, but he didn't necessarily want to come back on turf, which is what Ford Field is in Detroit. But Aaron Rodgers was kind of pushing him to come back a little bit and get out there, and maybe that's what he needed, because I thought he came out and he played really well. He played solid. Some of them he just dominated, and he looked like the Bakhtiari that everyone remembers as a potential future Hall of Fame left tackle. So I thought that he played really well. I thought Josh Meyer played really well. Lucas Patrick ended up going over to guard. I think Lucas Patrick's best position is probably guard, not necessarily center, even though I thought he played and has played very well at the center position. So the Packers are getting healthy and getting some of these really elite, I would say, if you remember last year, Jair Alexander was named first team NFL defensive cornerback. So that meant that he was one of the best, if not the best, cornerback in the league. And Zadarius Smith made the Pro Bowl again 2 years in a row. So they're getting back quality, elite type players on defense, and huge depth now at the on the offensive line going into the playoffs. And it seems like they're gelling together and working together as well. Good. So Matt LaFleur has done a really good job. That's Matt LaFleur and Matt LaFleur's staff's job, to bring those players together, to manage all of the different personalities. Because, again, you can have great X's and O's and play call guys, but unless you can manage the personalities and the emotions of a team, both the ebbs and flows of a season, and trust me, they've had a lot of them. They've had people out. They've had people that have to come in, and they more or less stayed the course all year. Haven't been always flashy, hasn't been great, but to be consistent and winning and get it done with having as many injuries as they've had and top-notch players going down is really a testament to Matt LaFleur and his staff. Matt LaFleur, he takes accountability for his mistakes. Whenever they lose or do something wrong, he's the first one to say, it's on me, I got to do a better job. He's not deflecting. I'd like to see him get a little bit more pissed off at certain things when they go wrong, because I think he needs to do that, but he's not a big screamer or yeller. He's more of a positive coach that's going to be coaching positive first and pointing out the stuff that needs to get corrected second. So you got to tip your hat to the guy. If they get to the Super Bowl and win it this year, that's just an amazing run. I mean, he's now the winningest coach in his first 3 years ever in the NFL. Great hire by Mark Murphy and, Russ Ball and Brian Gutekunst. Brian Gutekunst and Russ Ball, I think, contributed greatly to the hiring there, but it was ultimately Mark Murphy's call. And Mark Murphy, after Ted Thompson was, basically, I think, asked to resign, and, RIP Ted Thompson for what I never was a huge Ted Thompson fan for a lot of reasons, but you cannot argue with his results. He drafted Aaron Rodgers, got another Super Bowl, brought Mike McCarthy in, signed Charles Woodson. Even though he never signed any free agents, he was able to sign a future Hall of Famer. And I think Woodson became a Hall of Fame player in Green Bay. I think he was always a pretty good player in Oakland, but he really became a Hall of Fame and solidified his Hall of Fame status by playing in Green Bay for those years. So Ted Thompson did a great job and really should be commended. But after Mark Murphy took over and split up the hiring of the coach and the GM separately, and the salary cap guru, who was Russ Ball, when he basically had all three of those folks reporting to him, at that point 3 years ago, it became his team. He was always, the president. When the president, like Bob Harlan, signed Ron Wolf or signed Ted Thompson, and they just kind of ran it, and he was kind of the business guy. And Mark Murphy, after building Titletown and doing a lot of road shows and stuff, he understood that his legacy was going to be judged by if he could course correct. So kudos to him for setting up that structure, hiring Brian Gutekunst to be the GM, allowing him and empowering him, hiring Matt LaFleur to come in and be the coach. And, that kind of combination and that relationship has paid dividends now the last 3 years. And here we are on the cusp of getting into the NFC title game again. Still have to win in the divisional round. Whoever we're playing, we'll find that out tomorrow or Monday at the latest. And then we will, by Sunday, I don't know if this is whenever you're listening to this, but we have a great future in Green Bay. And I think Matt LaFleur clearly deserves to be coach of the year. The biggest problem of why he might not win it is because people are going to go, but you've had Aaron Rodgers, and he's been the MVP the last 2 seasons, and he's arguably the best thrower of the football that we've ever seen. Maybe not the best quarterback ever, because Tom Brady probably gets that because of all the championships he's won. But as far as pure talent of the quarterback position, you've had Matt LaFleur, you've had Aaron Rodgers, and so therefore it's really easy. Well, yes and no. He's had to manage Aaron Rodgers, who's a complicated fella, and manage the expectations with a first-round draft pick. Look, if you're Jordan Love and you're drafted in the first round, you expect to play. I mean, it's going to be his third year next year, and he still hasn't played. It's a lot like Aaron Rodgers, and those first-round picks are kind of expected to play and want to play because they want to show what they can do, because they understand if they play well, they're looking at tens of millions of dollars. It's a huge, huge business. And when somebody is blocking you because somebody else is in the way, you get antsy. And so for Matt LaFleur to manage how all of this is working and manage all these new folks coming in and be able to hire a staff that is going to manage their rooms, their specific position rooms, accordingly and efficiently and successfully, is a testament to him. I just think that he deserves Coach of the Year. If not now, when? When's he going to? What does the guy have to do? If he gets to the Super Bowl this year, he went to 2 in his first 3 years. He went to 2 NFC championship games and then won the Super Bowl, but he's not Coach of the Year. I don't get that, but okay. So with that, we've gone almost 50 minutes here or so, or close to an hour. So I'm going to wrap up and say thank you for listening to this Korey's Random Thought podcast. In no particular order, I kind of covered a lot of things. Hopefully I didn't do too many ums and ahs and whatever and screwed up my language, but I'm trying to get back in the swing of things, and I am doing this unscripted, so bear with me. So with that, thanks a lot, Packer fans, near and far, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. We'll see you out there. If you want to drop me an email, you can drop me an email at Korey, Korey, at acceptmedia.com. Accept is spelled A as an apple, X as an X-ray, CEPT, media.com. Again, that's Korey at acceptmedia.com. And let me know what you want me to talk about. Let me know what you want me to expand on or showcase, and we'll take it from there. Thanks so much, Packer fans. Until next time, go Pack Go.